and welcome to the first reading vlog of 2025. I have been reading these 3 books for the last couple days, and so I thought I would make a reading vlog. I don't know what day it is. I think it's the 4th. Yeah, I think it's the 4th. I do know it's a Saturday. This Christmas to New Year's this year, I know a lot of people have been talking about it on TikTok. It feels insane. I have just been relishing in this staycation at my parents' house. I'm headed back to the city in a little bit, but we're all just kind of chilling this afternoon. Hunker down. Before we get into the books, I've got a cup of tea, freshly brewed. It is cooling down. It's in this Disney Cruise Line mug that my parents, I think they got this when they came to visit me on the cruise. They came and sailed once in my year that I was working there, so I think they bought this then because I don't remember buying it. And then we do have some snacks. My mom had a friend over yesterday and she brought us pastries, and then my mom also got pastries, so that's my little tea snack. And then to set the mood, because I love an ambiance video, but I've been in a weird place music wise. Sometimes I can tell exactly what kind of music I want to listen to. Other times I've been really just enjoying a white noise fireplace crackle. So we've got cozy ambiance with fireplace, relax with warm background bar to give you a good night's sleep. And it's this probably AI generated image in a mountain place. And you know what? It makes me feel so cozy. So that's nice. Let's get into the books, shall we? So I brought a big stack of books to my parents, and I haven't made a dent in them because honestly, I finished my last read of 2024 and I was like, I'm in the mood to watch stuff. And I'm glad that I leaned into that. I've been sort of picking away at these 3 books over the last few days. I'm ready to get back into reading. So we are finishing 2 books that have traveled over into 2025 with me. The first one is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This was super popular. I know a lot of my friends read this, and I feel like I saw mixed reviews. A friend of mine gave this to me for my birthday this year because she really enjoyed it and she thought that I would like it. I am enjoying it. I am almost halfway through. I'm on page 155. There aren't any chapter numbers. And I am pleasantly surprised. I actually didn't think that I was going to like this. I am curious though, because I took such a big break from reading it. I feel like I haven't picked this up in a week and a half to 2 weeks. If I'd sort of kept going with the pattern of it, if I would be liking it more. But now that I've dropped back into it, I'm finding it a lot harder to pick up the pace again. So I'm kind of hoping that by giving myself this time, I can get back into it and enjoy it. For anybody that doesn't know what this book is about, we've got Emily Wilde. She is a Cambridge professor and she studies fae and fairies, and she has gone to this sort of remote village to study their fair folk, and she is specifically doing this because she is writing an encyclopedia on these fairies, and this is one of the last groups that no one has really studied, and she wants to have this all-encompassing encyclopedia. And she gets there and we start to realize that she is not aware socially, and that it's helpful for her in her research because she's able to sort of knuckle down. She knows how to talk to some of the fair folk that she has come across, but she doesn't really know how to talk to people and be personable. And especially in this situation where this village does not have a good relationship with the fair folk. They are cruel. They have taken some of their villagers. There's a little bit of pushback with these people because there's part of them that want to protect her and, keep other people at arm's length because they don't want to anger these already volatile creatures. But then you can tell there are some moments where they're playing games with her. It either brings them joy or they're hoping that it'll get her sent home. She's there for a little while, and then one of her partners at Cambridge comes to help her. And he has some ulterior motives because he knows that he has a little bit more weight in their world, and if he can write a foreword or if they can publish this encyclopedia together, then he'll be able to present at this really big conference because he needs to get some more funding, and one of his pieces had been debunked because his practices for research are not as thorough, let's say, as Emily's. It's probably like a step down from Hijinks in that it feels very like cozy and clever, not super high stakes. I'm also pleasantly surprised by the amount of reveals that have already happened and kind of keep us on our toes as we move through the book. I feel like a lot of these like cozier books that I read, they save some of the bigger reveals for later on, and it's kind of nice to be dropped with some of the bigger pieces of information early on so that ends up being what we're focusing on. This is book 1. I definitely feel like I can finish this weekend, so that is one of my goals. Got this big ol' fantasy book. This is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong, and I picked this up because my friend Zoran has talked about this book endlessly. Loves it so much, and Zoran and I have very similar tastes in fantasy books, so I had a feeling that I would enjoy it. It's been sitting on my shelf forever, and I finally picked it up somewhere in the beginning of December, and I really wanted to sink my teeth into this, and I feel like this is a good starter for 2025. So we are 125 pages in, and I'm enjoying it. The chapter that I'm in right now is dragging a little bit, and right now my biggest critique or like gripe about it is that some of the chapters are so long. Like the current chapter I'm in is a good 40 pages long, and I'm not really a long chapter girl. I kind of like tap out at 20. So I've been like taking breaks throughout this chapter. It's also one where we're like in the past and there's a lot of lore getting dropped. I'm enjoying it in the sense that we're getting to see it and like be in it, but I don't know, it feels slightly disjointed from where we were in the previous chapter. We've got 2 POVs so far. I'm gonna read this off the back. We've Mamoru, who is the son of, where is she? Misaki. And we're getting both of their POVs. And Mamoru, his father is this really important person in the place where they live. And their family has this lineage, which is this power, I guess, or a weapon that derives from their power. And Mamoru is having a really difficult time accessing that. It's giving him a lot of insecurity, and he's facing a lot from his dad because they are this really powerful family, and there's just a lot of pressure on him. There's this new kid at school from the city, and they're this small village, and he's really struggling with sort of being this like guide almost for this new kid, and really coming to terms with all the feelings that he's having internally and how that is affecting his outer life. And then his mom is a mystery. We meet her in a chapter where she is talking to a bunch of other women, and they're all saying how she's such a great mom with multiple kids and like how does she do it all. And you kind of get the sense within that chapter that her life was a lot bigger than marriage before she met her husband, or however their marriage came to be, and she's got some secrets of her own. And then we start to get a little bit of droppings from her son's POV where he talks about things his mom has taught him, and he's like, well, I don't really know how she would know that. And right now in the past, we're in one of her POVs, and so we're getting to see her sort of in action, and I'm really excited to see how these things converge. We do have yet to meet his dad, which I think is really interesting. Just really excited. I love a big fantasy book. We're getting a lot of like big lore dropped within the first 100 pages, which I think is good. I don't really like waiting for that kind of stuff. It already feels like even though we're in this sort of like remote village, the expanse of the world and how the world affects these people is already sort of like going in our minds. I do think I'm going to start with this one so that I can move through this chapter. I would like to keep it moving, and I feel like if I put it off and go for one of these other ones, I'm not going to touch this till Monday. And then the last one is the one I'm going to put off reading today, at least until I make it through a couple chapters in both of the other books, because I know I'm going to fly through this. This is The Gentleman's Gambit by Evie Dunmore. It is a historical romance. It's the 4th book, A League of Extraordinary Women. And I've read all the other books in the series, so I'm really excited to wrap this up. I definitely was putting it off because I've loved this series so much, and I didn't want to say goodbye to it or to these characters. We're at the end. This is Katrina, and she is a Scottish noblewoman, and we have met her in all the previous books. She is very smart. She is dedicated to the suffragist cause. And in all of these books is that all of these women are suffragists at Oxford, I think. She has been very unlucky in love, and we've kind of seen a little bit of that throughout the course of the other 3 women's books. The book kicks off with Katrina at her family home in Scotland, which we haven't been to yet, and she is getting ready to write a book. She needs the isolation because when she is back in England, she gets really wrapped up in the suffragist cause, and she just needs time to dedicate to her work. I think it's my favorite first chapter in the whole series. She is out on a loch having a little swim, and when she gets out, there is a stranger staring at her, and she is like, hello? Get out of here. What are you doing on this property? Like, I'm supposed to be alone. And they're both very embarrassed. And then it turns out that this man is her dad's colleague, and he is going to be staying with them. And there were some words exchanged that make both of them embarrassed. I am 30 pages in. I was reading this last night. I'm really enjoying it. So I'm gonna give this one a little bit of a break while I take some time on the other 2. And with all this talking that I've done, my tea has cooled down to the perfect drinking temperature. Woohoo. We're gonna get cracking on these books, and I'll check in with you in a little bit. I'm back in my apartment. My pipes are being so loud. I read literally the end of that chapter I was talking about, and then I made dinner for my family. I haven't read anything else, so I feel like everybody has this experience. Like, I love spending time with my family. It was really nice to get out of the city. I spent a week away. Kind of like, no, I would say a week, because last week when I came out on like Christmas Eve, and then I was home for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and then I had to come back to the city because we were finishing loadout on the hills of California. So I was like commuting on Thursday and Friday, and then I was out. So it's been a week since I've just been like on vacation, and it was much needed. But my back does not like the sleeping situation at my parents' house. So I feel like my muscles and bones are going to be much happier in my bed. Like, I can already feel myself just like relaxing. We are gonna wind down for the evening, continuing on the Sword of Kaigen. I just feel like I want to continue to make a bigger dent in this. Like, that's significant. I'm like almost 150 pages into this book, and I'm not super tired, so I feel like I could probably get like an hour of reading done. That chapter that I just finished was a ton of backstory, and it's a very specific moment in Misaki's. Let me make sure that's the right character. Yeah, Misaki's. This is like, I forget names so easy. So easy. When I have to film my like reviews or anything, I am staring at the back of the book trying to recall these people's names. Like, I don't know why character names do not stick in my mind. It does not matter. It doesn't matter if it's a romance, a fantasy, a thriller, contemporary historical fantasy or not. Like, I cannot keep names in my head. I don't know what it is. But anyway, this long chapter that I just finished was a specific point in Misaki's history. Particularly, she is about to learn sword training, and it definitely is important. Like, it feels like a big turning point in her life, and I'm glad we got to see it. However, there's a lot about her family and where she's from and why she's at this specific school that is just sort of like talked about. Based on how ML Wong is writing, I feel like we're going to keep understanding this world as we move along, but it just kind of felt like an interesting place to drop us without any context. Also, the chapter header was the past, but every chapter has a name. Like that was chapter 6, chapter 7 is the sun. S-U-N, S-O-N. So when I started reading the chapter, I couldn't tell where we were because I was like, are we actually in the past? Like there was no indication otherwise on the page that like we were many years previous. It was also a little disjointed, but we made it. We made it. It's been a long time. I remember last year, like at the beginning of the year, I was reading a lot of books that had long chapters, and I was like, I'm done. I'm reading short chapters only. And I fluctuate. And what I like is when authors vary their chapter lengths. I actually don't like when chapters are the exact same length in every book. I kind of enjoy a like 2-page chapter, and then a 5-page chapter, and then a 1-page chapter, and then a 10-page chapter, and then like, because sometimes you need more pages, like a 20-page chapter, sure, throw it in there. But I don't like when every single chapter is consistently 20 pages long. That drives me nuts. I also don't enjoy when chapters are consistently 3 chapters long. Like I need a little bit more, but that's just me. Anyway, I'm gonna read my book and I'll probably see you tomorrow. Okay, so yesterday here's my bookmark. Really got into the Sword of Kaigen. Like I literally have just over a quarter of the book left. I feel like I might finish it tonight, maybe, depending on the pacing. The chunk I read last night was so fast-paced. It was so different from the beginning of the book, which I took a break from reading and was reading through pretty slowly. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go pretty slow. And then, oh, the tables turned. Oh, the tables did turn. Wow. I want to get into reading this, so that maybe I'm not up until like the ass crack of dawn finishing it. We'll check in and I'll kind of, I think when I finish we'll talk through what I liked, what I didn't like. But wow. I'm enjoying this so much and I like the writing style so much that I almost read this all night last night. At midnight I was like, you need to sleep, so I had to like put it down and put on a little meditation to fall asleep. And it's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've read a book that like woke me up at 11 p.m. and I was like, whoa, what's happening? Okay, so this has been the weirdest 24 hours, which I'll get into later. I kind of just want to get into reading at the moment. We have a big snow day. I'm at my parents'. I came out to them for the weekend because we were going to this Irish music thing yesterday, and then there was a big snowstorm planned for today, so I was like, I guess I'll just stay and go home tomorrow. And what a perfect day to just read. I've been a little distracted because I want to get into doing the like weekly report. I've seen 2 of my friends do it, Rachel and Sanj, and it's basically like it's an anagram for reading, eating, playing, obsessing, recommending, treat. And so I posted that and wanted to make like cute graphics for it that I can use for like the rest of the month, and I'll probably like theme the backdrop for each month. And then TikTok came back online. It was supposed to be banned today. And we were down for about 14 hours. So it's been interesting. I've been kind of like on there seeing what people are saying, but I just scrolled across one of my own videos on TikTok, so I was like, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna log out. I'm gonna spend a couple hours reading this book. So I am 6 chapters. I think I'm about to start chapter 6 on this. Ooh, the snow is really picking up. This is exciting. I have mixed feelings about this. I don't know if it's because it's been so long since I've read a historical, or if I'm just like this is a slow build up one. I'm very much at the beginning. Like, I'm gonna give it a go. I am finishing this reading vlog tonight, and I'm gonna talk about the 3 books that I started this reading vlog off with. I'm gonna try to not bounce my camera. Figuring out this new tripod that I have, and it just does this like wobble thingy. Anyway, I kind of want to focus on where we started. Definitely took me a little bit longer to get through all 3 of them than I anticipated, but it's also because I took some tangents along the way. I'm really happy with where I'm at this far into January. It's the 21st of January, and I've read quite a bit. So let's jump in, shall we? The Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. And I left this with mixed feelings. I liked it. I'm glad I read it. I don't regret reading it. I don't feel the need to continue the series. It just isn't really pulling me right now, even though it's not as cozy as it seems. Like, there is quite a bit of violence and high stakes things happening. The in-between moments were too cozy for me. So I ended up feeling, I don't want to say bored, but just kind of like meh most of the time. And the peaks did not outweigh the valleys. And I feel like when I go into cozy fantasies, I really need equal amounts of peaks and valleys to keep my interest. And I felt like we'd come up to a peak and then we would drop into a valley. And then the end of the book was actually like pretty steady peak wise, but I just was, we're gonna wait for this to go by. I think also compared to the other books that I really engaged with this month, I've just been looking for a little bit more action in the books that I'm reading, and this just didn't give that to me. So that's kind of where I've landed. It also took me like a month to read. It wasn't the kind of book where I felt like I could really take a break for a day. I needed to consistently read like chunks of it every day. Otherwise, it would just sort of fall to the wayside and I never would have finished it. And I found it really interesting how Heather really presented this and how, like, you know, things differ from country to country and land to land. Was able to really bring in a bunch of different perspectives on Fae lore into a new book. I also thought that, like, coming at this from a like encyclopedia of somebody that's like studying these Fae was also really interesting. Then we come into the Sword of Kaigen. At the end of the day, like, aside from the criticisms that I have of it, I really enjoyed it. I found her action sequences to be particularly well written. They are some of my favorite action sequences I've ever read. I was really impressed by how sustained her action could be. Like, there was a solid 100 pages, which I feel like is a huge chunk to be like, whoa, I'm so engaged. There's so much happening. I'm like invested in every movement on the page. That is the shining glory of this book. It's also, and I was talking with my friend Zoran about this, I really enjoyed how it doesn't fall into like a Western story structure. So you kind of expect that there's gonna be this like big battle thing, right? Because it is titled A Theonite War Story. Like, we know that something is coming, but the book actually ends up having 2 climaxes, and I quite like that idea of things, because we're not left with wondering how these people are going to pick up the pieces after. We get to see that. And a lot of times that's the part that I am really interested in these like bigger epic fantasies. It self-contains itself really, really well, in that I'm absolutely fine for this to be a standalone. I think she could expand on this in so many directions. And I was just really fascinated. It did take me 200 pages to get into, but I do often say that I'm like, I can see it behind my lamp. When I read Priory of the Orange Tree, it also took me 200 pages to get into that, and it is one of my favorite books. So I'm not mad when it takes me a little bit to get into the story, because I'm getting into the story structure. There is a lot of like backstory that needs to get built to tell the end of the story. So that didn't really bother me. I was like absolutely fine. I was along for the ride. And then once we were on, like, we hit that 200 page mark and it flew. The last 400 pages flew. I was like, I don't know if I was recording when I was doing this. I could not put it down. Could not put it down. It was so gripping. So I really liked that. I think my biggest gripe is that the chapters were really long, especially in those lead up chapters within that first 200 pages. It made it really sluggish to get through. And I am somebody, I love chapter breaks. If it's gonna be a long chapter, like you're not gonna break it up for 40 pages and we're telling something important for 40 pages, I do need some like breaks in the pages to get me through. And we also spent quite a bit of time in the past that I wasn't super invested, if that makes sense. So it did feel a little rough trying to like get to that 200 page mark, and then we were in it. But I do think that everything in those 200 pages was needed. So I don't know if it just needed to be like condensed down or formatted different or what. Also, because I think this was published independently, there's just like a handful of random formatting things that are confusing to me. Like sometimes conversation was in italics, sometimes it wasn't. Like sometimes they would say they were speaking in a different language, but it wasn't really indicated. And so those kinds of things I do take into consideration. I think there are a lot of people that hear that and they were like, oh, you're just being nitpicky. And I'm like, but it does make a difference in how you engage with the story, particularly when you're reading it with your eyeballs. But overall, I mean, it was awesome. It was awesome. It was so good. I think I gave this close to 5 stars on Instagram. It was really, really good. It also got me thinking about a lot of what I engage with right now. Like I've been shying away from emotional fantasies and like things that bring up big emotions for me. And that slowly that's been chipping away, and I'm kind of like, okay, you know what? I do like when a fantasy book can really like dig in under my skin and really get me thinking. Particularly this one got me thinking a lot about the role of women. Even today, men can dictate how women exist in society. One of the bigger themes of this book is how government utilizes isolation to drive a narrative. Especially like finishing this and then going into a potential TikTok ban, I was like, gung gung. Yeah, it was like, oh, I have so much to process from this. That is something that I really love about fantasy. I love when I can find reality in fantasy and it gets me to not only enjoy a really good story, but it gets me to engage with life outside of the story. And then we come to the third book, The Gentleman's Gambit. The thing I have liked about all of Evie's books in this series is how she balances this historical plot. Like there's always something going on outside of the romance, and it usually has to do with the suffragists. All the women are suffragists and they are trying to get legislation passed. And what I'm really glad that Evie does is at the back of all of the books, she tells you the liberties that she took. Like she's changed a couple things timeline-wise, but she took inspiration from this, like this act is real, da 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 da. So you are engaging with quite a bit of history as you read these books. However, I think the balance was off quite a bit in this one. I felt like for the most part, the romance took a big backseat to the political plots on both fronts. And I also found it particularly slow. I don't know, again, if it's because I've been reading a lot of fantasy books this month, and so reading something that just is a little bit slower, it took me quite a bit to get into it. And then once I was in it, I was still kind of like, I feel like I'm just sort of like chugging through this. I am glad that I finished the series, and I do really like Evie's writing. I've clearly read the whole series, so there's that. Okay, and that's it. The first reading vlog of 2025 is done. I'm intrigued in this like style. That's that. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or if you think you're going to read any of these, and I will see you in the next one for some new books.